A pioneer in public finance since 1955, Ellers helps clients build outstanding places to live, work, learn, and play by delivering focused, fully integrated financial advisory services. We work with more than 1,500 local governments, schools, development authorities, and public agencies, placing their needs and best interests at the heart of everything we do. We help our clients navigate all facets of public finance, including financial management planning, economic development and redevelopment, debt issuance and management, investments and treasury management, and arbitrage consulting. At Ellers, we believe strong communities aren't simply the result of transactions. They're the result of people. We build strong, long-lasting client relationships, collaborating with your staff to complete projects and drive new initiatives forward. Building strong, vibrant, and sustainable communities. Together, it's what we do. For more information, call us at 1-800-552-1171 or visit ellers-inc.com.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discuss best practices for presenting financial information to policymakers and the public. I'm Keith Dahl, Municipal Advisor with Ellers, and I'll be serving as your host and moderator today. Before I introduce our special guest and my colleague, and before we get started, I have three quick housekeeping items to mention to help ensure that you have an interactive experience with us today. You'll notice in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there are two icons. One is called Live Q&A, and the other is Chat. As we move through today's session, if you have a question you'd like us to answer, simply open up the Q&A tab, type in it, and click Submit. We will take a break at the end of our session today to answer any questions that you've submitted. If you want to connect with your fellow attendees throughout the session, you can also use the chat function. One thing to note, while you can submit any question anonymously, in the event we're not able to get to all of the questions today, we recommend you allow us to see your information so we may reach out to you directly with specific answers or to discuss further. Lastly, if at any point during our presentation today you start to notice either video or audio lag, please go ahead and refresh your browser, and that will get you right back on track. Now that we've covered those items, let's go ahead and get started. It's my pleasure to welcome our special guest, Ellie Paulseth, Finance Director for the City of Maplewood, and my colleague, Bruce Kimmel, Senior Municipal Advisor here at Ellers. Bruce, I know you're going to get things started for us today, so you can take it away.
Great. Thanks, Keith. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this rainy Thursday morning for this final session in the track of fiscal smarts and financial stability that we're calling Talking the Talk. And as Keith mentioned, it's really just to share some ideas and best practices around presenting financial information to elected officials and to the stakeholders in your communities. We're really excited to have Ellie Paulseth here with the City of Maplewood to be sharing her ideas and some of her experiences in presenting financial information to her community. And we'll be covering a number of key concepts throughout this presentation. We'll be talking about knowing your audience, building trust, not only with decision makers, but also the public, keeping it simple, and communicating effectively. And we'll be underlining all of these concepts with the examples as we go, and then providing a few additional examples at the end of the session. So at this point, leading off with knowing your audience, whether you're introducing a potential capital financing or a new CIP more generally, or looking at your annual budget or a new TIF project, whatever the case might be when it comes to financial information, it's really crucial to start by thinking about your audience and thinking about how you're going to tailor your level of information and detail to that audience. So Keith, if you would pull up the live poll, we're going to start with just a quick poll to get us all underway. And what we would like to know is, who is your most challenging audience in presenting financial information? And do we have that up?
Yeah.
Okay, in a second. Great. So your choices, and you can only choose one, is going to be elected officials, excuse me, so the city council or the county board, the public, or non-financial staff members. And with that, we'll be taking your responses and getting back to you with the results. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellie to get started on the topic of knowing your audience.
Thank you so much, Bruce, and good morning, everyone. When Bruce first talked to me about this presentation, I was very intrigued by it because presenting financial information is really kind of the art of being a finance director. And as finance people, we're very science-minded creatures, right? Our presentations tend to be very technical, and so I would like to share some tips and tricks that I've learned over the years on my experiences. So again, as Bruce mentioned, we present both to elected officials or the public, or both together, and that may require a different approach. So the first thing that I think is very important for both the elected officials and the community is to establish goals. So you need to include the concerns and initiatives of both the governing body and the community. The priorities should be somewhat established before the budget or the CIP process begins. And in some communities, like Maplewood, we have quite a long process where we have the public come in for input, and some of your communities may not do that, so it may be a little bit more challenging. Maybe you just meet with your city council. That's okay. They represent the community. Listen closely to what their initiatives and concerns are, and make sure that they are addressed on some level during the budget process. In Maplewood, our council priorities are debt reduction. The council is very concerned about that. They also want to see more street improvements. So there's a number of different things that we identified before the process even started. Your goal as the finance director or the presenter is to sell the budget or the CIP. And in order to do this, you do need to know what those challenges are. So in defining the challenges, you really need to do that up front in order to meet the goals. Taxpayers are typically interested in, are my taxes going up and why? The council is very interested in, how will I explain this budget to taxpayers? Both groups are also very interested in whether or not their interests are being considered and included. So again, with Maplewood, we let our council know with a slide similar to this, that we have balanced their interest, and that would be, in this case, debt reduction with street improvements. So for this particular case, they wanted to reduce debt but increase services. So we had to walk through a process with them and find additional revenue sources. And in order to do that, we had to lay this out for them very carefully. And so we remind them of this in a slide. The next thing is to be very concerned about establishing a timeline. It's very important to get this done up front, so that everyone, the public and the elected officials, understand the process and each step of the process and where and when they can provide input. So in Maplewood, we have online budget and transparency portals for the public to access. You need to also be concerned with citizens who maybe don't have online access, and how you're going to engage with those folks and get them involved in the process. This helps to build trust.
Great, thanks, Ellie. Before we move on to this next topic of building trust, I just wanted to share the results of the poll that we took. According to Keith, our responses are as such. 69% of you identified city council or county board as the most challenging audience. 19% chose the public, and 11% chose non-financial staff members. So it's really interesting that you're seeing your elected officials as being the most challenging audience to communicate effectively to, and to get them to retain information and to trust the information. And so that's really what Ellie's and I will be talking about mostly during the rest of the seminar. So we're glad we're on point with that. Ellie, one question I had before we pivot is on that capital planning timeline that you referred to, that arrow. How often do you, as you move along that track of that CIP process, how often do you come back to that 5-year CIP? Do you come back to that every year and help the council see that it's how it ties to the annual budget, or do you do it more frequently than every year as on an as needed basis, or basically what kind of frequency do you find effective?
So yes, Bruce, thanks for that question. We do go through quite a process every year in capital improvement planning. We include the public, we include the planning commission, obviously the city council. And that plan then is reestablished each year. It begins with staff members and moves on through that process as was shown on the slide. And thank you for pointing that out.
All right, moving on to building trust. Thanks, Ellie.
Okay, thank you. So trust depends on ready access to understandable, accurate information about how the government spends money. So there's a number of ways that you can do this. In Maplewood, we do try to include the community in the decision-making process and show concerns for all viewpoints. When presenting, I try to minimize technical jargon and speak to them on their own terms, build a relationship with them, and know what's important to them. Lots of details generally don't tell them what they want to know. More is not always better. So if we could go back one slide to long-term financial planning. Thank you. So part of building trust is demonstrating that you have a long-term financial planning component in your process. You need to show the council more than one path forward. Our council likes to see different scenarios. They want to know what happens if they issue debt for the fire station, and if they don't, or if they delay it for 2 years. So be able to demonstrate that you have planned. In this case, our council really likes this chart because it kind of looks like a checkbook balance. And it shows them how we've planned out for 10 years, what our outstanding debt currently is, how much debt is being paid per year, and how much new debt is being taken on. And it shows them that we're meeting their goals, even with the CIP projects. We're meeting their goals of reducing the debt to the level that they are concerned about or that they want to reach. So another concern that Maplewood has is they want to see the S&P ratio. So the Standard & Poor's has guidelines for evaluating municipal debt. They would like to see, in the case of Maplewood, they would like to see the debt and contingent liability portfolio in this particular measure that's shown on the screen moved from weak to adequate. And so we were able to, through our long-term planning process, we were able to demonstrate when approximately that's going to happen. And each year that we present this, we seem to be pretty much right on track with what our projections are going to be. Again, it's important to present this every year so that they continue to realize that you are monitoring their concerns. So another important aspect for our city council was benchmarks. They really weren't sure how they wanted to evaluate the city's outstanding debt. And so after discussions with them, we landed on these two, debt to market value and debt per population. You can use any benchmark that the council finds relevant. That's what's important. Your governing body understands it and appreciates it. So work with them to determine which measures are most important. So for Maplewood, it was these two measures. And again, it's important to show them in an easily understandable graph the projected scenarios. In our case, again, it's about debt with the CIP and without the CIP project. So it's important that they understand that you show them the what if scenarios, and that you have more than one path forward. So what we do is we might have 2 or 3 of these charts depending on which CIP projects they want to carve out or add in. Also important to show the community impact on the spending decisions. Our council is very concerned about property taxes in Maplewood. So through our long-term planning process, we were able to project, and again, it's a projection, but project the tax impact on the community, to determine if the decisions are affordable and how to prepare for the future. This also helps build trust in the process. So again, it's also important to evaluate the tax rate from a long-term perspective. So we actually do this for 10 years. This is a 5-year chart. The taxes may increase, but the rates may decrease. So it's really important to show both sides of that equation. It is an important economic and rating factor. So it's to, keep that in mind when you're making projections, that it is a projection, but a projection is still better than making a decision in a vacuum. And it does instill confidence with your governing body and with your community that you are concerned about the impact on the community.
That was great, Ellie. Thank you. You know what I think is really powerful about the slides that you just presented is how they look at issues like capital planning and new projects like street reconstruction and tax impact and debt load in different ways, so that depending on how a certain council member or member of the public interprets data, whether they like that checkbook table, as you put it, or if they like graphs, you're appealing to different ways of processing information, and it's the same information, but conveyed in different ways. Another thing that I've really found in my experience, not only working with Maplewood, but other communities, is that what you're really showing here in terms of building trust is the importance of setting the plan and then showing that you're working the plan, right? It's working the plan, working the plan, working the plan. You're not going rogue as city staff. You are working from their priorities, the plans that have been set, and here's how the plan plays out from year to year and over that 5 or 10 year planning horizon. And for me, that seems to be the number one thing in terms of building trust and avoiding having the council reinvent the wheel constantly. If you can show, hey, we're really working the plan that you set and it's going according to plan.
Absolutely. Thank you for this. So moving on to the next slide, did you have anything to add to that, Bruce? If we could go back one slide, please. Could we go back one slide, please? Okay, so the next topic is to keeping it simple. To people in today's society have very busy lifestyles, and they're already navigating information overload. So financial information can be very complex, and it's hard to maintain an attention span. So we need to break it down in manageable portions. And stick with key takeaways, not the entire financial process. Your financial consultant is always available to present complex information, but you want to speak to them at a level that they find most easy to understand. So moving on to talking about capital improvement financing, this is one of the slides that we use, something similar to this in Maplewood. To kind of show them how we finance capital projects. It's very high level. We're not getting into numbers or getting into the weeds, but it's easy to digest. And in this instance, it does address the council's concerns about appropriate use of debt financing. And so this is the second half of that slide. And basically what we want to demonstrate to them when we show them this is ensure that they have an understanding of the alignment of the funding sources and the property tax revenue. Again, instilling some confidence in the process that you have this covered, that not everything is coming from property taxes. You have a number of revenue sources, and that you understand that up front and you have it laid out up front. So this is another slide that we often use in Maplewood, and kind of to remind the City Council how important their decision was that they made when we first laid out to them the fact that we needed additional revenue sources besides debt to finance street improvements, and they were supportive of establishing a franchise fee. And so we tend to remind them every year of what a success that program was to add a new revenue source into the street financing program. And we remind them where the other revenue sources are coming from. and just to keep reminding them that that they had a successful decision, and we continue to use that platform. Again, very simply, continue to show them the results every year through the CIP process. We always let them know what we did the year before and what we're going to do in this current year. How many miles of streets are we improving? Showing the connection between the budget and the outcome. Focusing most on the outcomes, which are what is most important to the audience.
Great, thanks, Ellie. I know we're going to pivot here in a second to some other metrics and information that you share more broadly with the public. But I wanted to ask you, has this information that you've been sharing on the CIP encouraged your council to want to keep exploring different revenue options? Or I guess, you've very effectively conveyed how you're bringing a medley of funding options to the fore. And I guess, are they comfortable with the existing set of options, or are you thinking of ways of maybe looking at different mixes and how to convey that to the public and to the elected officials?
So yes, that's an important question. We do continue to have those conversations with the City Council, and just the fact that we continue to remind them about the success of the franchise fee component, it has built, it's instilled confidence, and it has kind of built trust. And we've got kind of a rapport now where when we talk about new revenue sources, whether it's a sales tax or some other form of revenue, they're open to listening.
So the franchise fee sounds like really kind of paved the path towards potential other revenue.
I think so. That and along with the kind of open and transparent process that was used.
One other question I had really quick, I don't want to belabor it, but I know that Maplewood has had, I think, success in continuing to use special assessments because you have such a strong track record and you haven't really deviated from that. Do you find that you've been able to, keep council buy-in and public buy-in on using special assessments, or is that evolving as well?
Yeah, that is evolving as well. We are kind of moving towards a hybrid process where the city is financing its own special assessments rather than issuing debt for them. We still issue debt for street projects, but we're kind of moving to a little bit of a different model. And I'm not sure if that was.
Yeah, no, that is. I think it just shows that even for things that are kind of a fixed part of the funding formula, it's always evolving, and how you communicate will probably need to evolve as well. Yeah, great. So I think we're ready to go on to some other ways that you look to communicate effectively.
Okay, awesome. I do believe there were a couple of slides that got missed, but it was basically about providing performance data and reporting consistently. And we'll cover this a little bit further down in the slide deck. Maplewood uses a performance measurement portal on its website, and also there we go. We're moving back there. So this again, keeping in with the idea of reporting back. Maplewood uses a performance measurement system, and the portal is on the website, but we also report to the City Council on a quarterly basis. And again, just reporting consistently. In this case, this happens to be the finance department measures that we're showing you, so that on our website you can drill deeper and find out what each department is doing. Must be transparent to be effective. Okay, so moving on to our communication sector. Again, we try to make it attractive and really just understand that we're here to help people understand. So whether that's through a presentation or through our website, in this case, our financial transparency website, It provides a snapshot into the government's financial performance. So our monthly reporting to our monthly financial reporting to council is still very important, and we still provide that, and it still is in the council packets. But the website portal for financial transparency opens up a new way for residents and taxpayers to get this information and communicate with the city. So in this particular slide here, we're showing how you can drill down. There are interactive features, so you can actually drill down and get detail from the slide as you drill in deeper and deeper and deeper, down to the department level, down to the line item level. So it's something that your community can kind of have fun with and learn something about the city's finances or your local government's finances along the way. And again, this is a little bit of a repeat, but it's also to point out how the performance measurement portal ties back to the strategic plan. The strategic plan is the basis for Maplewood's performance measurement portal. So everything that's in our strategic plan is measured in some way and is available to the public. We also have a website portal. So again, that's a little bit different from the financial portal, because the financial portal is activity that has already taken place. And so the budget portal is for the upcoming budget process, whichever it might be. And so that provides some fiscal transparency for the public, staff members, rating agencies, and the governing body. And again, each of these icons can be drilled into, and you can get budget information on the city's website about all of these departments, and it's fairly robust. So we find it an important factor with communicating the budget to our citizens. And we also have a capital planning website. So this is the dashboard for that. Just keeping in mind that you really need to go to your audience. And so this is how we do it. And this is utilized by the public, our own staff members, the governing body, city council, rating agencies, and also developers who are interested in bidding on the projects. They watch for these projects. So in this portal, it's rich in drill down features as well. You can see a dashboard, drill into each department's dashboard, and then drill into each project and find out how it's financed and when it's going to take place. So we find this extremely important, our website portals, and each of these portals has a mechanism for the community members to interact with the city by sending an email, and then we can respond to citizens in that way. So now I'll turn this back to my presentation. Kimmel.
Great, thanks, Ellie. I just had one question about your portal. Do you have a staff member assigned to monitoring those questions and to updating information in real time or near real time as it relates to budget performance, or how do you anticipate that portal expanding and your utilization of that evolving in the the next 1 or 2 years?
Yes, we do. We are fortunate enough in Maplewood to have a communications department with a dedicated website employee. So not everyone is that fortunate. I understand that you may have to, shore up some resources from your existing staff members, but I do see us expanding on this as we move forward. I believe that we'll probably at some point no longer even be producing a paper document. It will all be electronic.
Great, thank you. Good. Well, rolling right along, we just wanted to give you a few additional informations of sharing financial information as it relates to debt management, since that's a big part of what we do here at Ehlers. And we wanted to give you examples that we are categorizing as simple and straightforward, complex and complete, and tried and true. We're really going for the alliteration here today. So moving on to simple and straightforward, sometimes it just takes an illustration that debt is amortizing off. Sometimes, city councils will be focused on the here and now and the amount of debt outstanding or your debt service levy obligation in 2021, and they're not really looking over the horizon as to what additional capacity might be freed up in the future. So we often will present graphs somewhat like this that show not only your existing debt. So here we've got a real client that has debt from 2011, 2013, 16, 19. And then you can see those bars, how they fall off over time. And so, it can help just to start with those bars, but then also to take the next step of early in the process saying, if you were to finance a major new project over, let's say, a 20-year time horizon, what would the potential debt structure and the tax impact look like? So you can see with this example, it's just a fairly simple wraparound structure in which we show that with a very minimal increase in debt burden in 2022 and 23, you've got the ability to finance a major new facility in the case of this specific client without really raising the tax impact and actually allowing some debt to fall off over time as well, even with this new debt service. So that's just one example. Then moving on to complex and complete, I have to admit that I probably err on the side of doing this too often, and my communications person says, go more with the simple and straightforward. But sometimes, elected officials find it helpful to have sort of a placemat, as I call it, with all of the relevant data in one place so that they're not flipping between pages and that it's a one-stop shop for information. Now, I find that it's helpful to actually be there in person when I'm presenting information like this because it is data heavy, and that is one of the risks here. So you wouldn't want to just put this in a council packet perhaps and just trust that the council members can navigate their way through it. But it's a way to really show that we're taking all of the major drivers into account in one place and that we're not missing something significant. So it's building confidence, building trust. So this is the example, and I know it's hard to see. We're going to break it down here in a minute, but this was a placemat, if you will, or a table mat that we put together recently for Winona County as it relates to their new jail project. So what we wanted to show is not only what would be the future debt levy for this project, but also what the tax impact would be on the county, and then drilling down to specific types of property, residential property, commercial, ag, and showing how we're calculating those tax impacts. Because county commissioners and also city council members want to know if we're showing a tax impact, they want to know that it's real and that they can actually share it with property owners with confidence and not worry that, the rug's going to be pulled out from under them in terms of communicating the tax impact of a debt issue. So going into a little bit more of a breakout, here's the debt levy. Not too exciting, but what we did is a two-phase debt issuance for this project, about a $25 million project, with the first phase of debt being the blue bars and the second phase of debt being the orange bars. And the county wanted to show how that net impact was going to be ramping up over time. In addition, that line conveys the operating savings and existing debt levy that's falling off. What we're showing essentially is that the first tranche of debt is being covered by savings in the county budget, which is helpful in building buy-in on a financing plan. Then here, again, still too much data, I know, but again, if you can convey it in person, I think it can be an effective way of building buy-in. We calculate the debt levies, the estimated debt levies, and then on a by type of property, as I noted before. And as all of you know, in Minnesota, it's pretty complicated calculating taxes with market value homestead credits and so on. So we show all of that and how it translates through to the net new debt levy that would be required in terms of the tax capacity rate and how you get to that annual impact as a result of that. And these numbers, if you can see that, are pretty nominal. For a $300,000 homestead, it's about $33 a year. And that was really a selling point in terms of convincing the county board that this was a viable financing plan. Okay, and last, tried and true. This is an example that we worked on with a county client relating to their local option sales tax. they got legislative approval and implemented a sales tax about a decade ago, and they're still paying debt service with that LOST. But now they're actually looking at, well, they did a refinancing that lowered the burden of debt on that lost, and we're looking at the ability of potential for redeeming bonds early and possibly renewing that local option sales tax. So what we wanted to do with this is to test different assumptions, stress test different assumptions, and make sure that it was something that the staff would be comfortable updating on an ongoing basis, since this really is a tracking tool. So just looking at this chart here, you can see that, again, it's nothing really fancy. It's really more of an internal document. But here we're looking at those lost revenues, giving staff the ability to update those numbers as we get more actual numbers going forward, actual collections going forward. And then we're showing existing debt service and then how much balance would be building up over the next 5 years, and tracking that relative to the the principal balance on the bond. So we can sort of see where those lines cross and where the county might be able to pay off bonds early, and again, go to voters for a new set of authorizations and new projects. Okay, oh yes, thank you. So here is a second scenario of the same workbook. Again, just testing a new set of assumptions as to the local option sales tax collections. And here we're able to show that if the collections continue on what is actually closer to the current course, that this county would actually be able to pay off the bonds a year earlier. And so they're actually thinking that scenario 2 is the most likely at this point. And so we've actually begun to have conversations as to the next set of projects that could be supported with sales tax. Okay, I think we're ready for some Q&A. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bruce and Ellie, for all this great insight on all this information related to financial planning and so forth. So we do have a few questions. I want to start with Bruce, and Ellie, you can jump in as well with this question. But how do you guide policymakers into choosing metrics that are meaningful to your community?
Well, that's really a key one, and it's about, I think it starts with knowing your audience. You know, if a council member really seems to be set on understanding the tax rate, and Ellie gave an example of how their tax capacity rate is going to evolve over time, I think it's really important to know that motivation. Why are they so interested in that tax rate? Is it because they have a neighbor who's always saying that, you know, the tax rate should be under 50%, for instance? Or is it just a helpful metric for them, you know, no matter the hidden details, just to understand where that rate is at? And from there, you can think about, okay, well, we'll you know, accommodate that interest, but it's probably more impactful or more relevant to know what that tax impact is per residence, right? What is the actual dollars and cents impact? So how can you still honor that you know, interest in the tax rate metric, but say it's this and the actual tax impact? I don't know if you can always, you know, get a council to go with the metrics that you as staff find are the most important, but I think there's through careful listening, active listening to council members and maybe members of the public as well, you can hopefully get them to focus less on that one touchstone and also on ones that you think are more relevant to the discussion at hand.
Yeah,
Ellie, what do you think
I'd like to add to that too. So in Maplewood, and I know a lot of other cities employ this method as well, we really tie everything to outcomes. We take a look at our strategic plan. What outcomes, you know, do we want from our strategic plan? So it may not be, you know, that we're counting the number of police calls. It's maybe the crime rate or the number of police calls per 1,000 in population. It's not, you know, necessarily the number of miles of roads that we pave, but the number of miles of roads in the context of the entire road system. So really converting everything to kind of a ratio, not just keeping data for the purpose of keeping data, although I love data, but putting it in a meaningful format that really speaks to your strategic plan and shows the outcome.
You know, Keith, one other thing I would just note that Maplewood does really well is they tie specific policy decisions back to their overarching goals and objectives. And I think that's a really helpful way of keeping everyone's eye on the prize, right? In terms of not only outcomes, as Ellie mentioned, but what are the strategic objectives that this specific policy issue is impacting, either positively or perhaps negatively, depending on your perspective. But I think that can also help keep all of the stakeholders involved focused on the bigger picture and not going off on metrics that really aren't relevant or as relevant to the policy.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So, Ellie, there's a few questions in regards to your website and your dashboard portals and so forth, but we'll start with the first one. Is the portal all run by clear.gov, or who's hosting these website portals for the city of Maplewood?
Okay, so a number of the portals are hosted by ClearGov. So that particular platform is one that met the budget requirements for the city of Maplewood. Some of you may have a larger platform. OpenGov is one. I'm not trying to sell one or the other, but OpenGov would also do the hosting. So it's a matter of providing the data as it is available. So immediately as we close our financial year for 2020, we'll be providing them actual data, and they will upload it to the website. The performance measurement portal is a little bit more internally managed. It's still a subscription basis, but we're able to actually do that in-house. But some of the financial management portals and the CIP portal is, the capital improvement portal is somewhat a hybrid of both. It's managed internally, but there is also some aspects of it that are done by ClearGov.
Okay, awesome.
Ellie, what I want to know is, at what point is there going to be a holographic avatar of you explaining the budget?
You know, I hate to tell you this, but it already exists. And it is out there on our portal.
Okay. Cool.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm going there right now. You know, following along those same lines as far as managing the portals and so forth, there's another question in regards to these portals and how much time does it take your department to spend populating the financial information, and then what kind of commitment is it to maintain this information?
Yeah, great question. That is a concern, and it's been a concern of mine for a long time, which is why I hesitated a little bit. I have found that once you get through the first year, it becomes much easier. And what we're doing here is we're moving towards a paperless environment. So I will, as soon as we're satisfied with the printed copy that ClearGov can provide, we will be moving away from producing that PDF document, which, as most of you know, takes hours and hours and hours every year to produce. So we're kind of mitigating that impact by reducing the amount of paper that we're producing, the amount of time that we're putting into paper documents.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Bruce, it looks like this question's for you. Tips for presenting budget in a simple and straightforward manner. I know you had a slide on this, but do you have any high-level tips that you want to share to the audience?
Right. Well, again, I think it depends on your audience and their relative knowledge and sophistication level with how a city or a county budget works. And in our experience, helping our clients with budget presentations as well as long-term financial management presentations or capital improvement plans, whatever the case might be. I find it's really helpful to start at a high level of information with, not all the line items, but collapse those line items into categories so that people can more readily see what are the major changes that are being proposed from one budget year to the next. So sort of that macro level strategic perspective on what's being proposed or what's being necessitated. And then from there, start adding the detail, right? And that might be an all-in-one session, but sometimes it actually might be helpful to do that in multiple sessions, especially if you've got new council members that have never been through a budget process before. So, you have to think about how much can my audience really digest, and especially if there's a lot of moving pieces or a lot of changes that are being proposed, you might want to say, okay, we're just going to take this in chunks, right? And start with a high level strategic view. Maybe you actually start with a presentation on what the last couple of years of budget results have looked like. And then that can be a nice platform to say at a high level, here's what we're proposing for 2022. And then maybe in the next session, let's break this down a little bit more so you can see some of the nuts and bolts, and building trust that way and confidence and understanding. I think especially with an audience that doesn't maybe have as much fluency with budgeting, to throw all the information at them at one time is not only going to risk them not understanding, but could breed some distrust or suspicion, and you certainly don't want to risk.
Awesome. Thank you for elaborating on that, Bruce. All right. So the last question that we have here is in regards to the last slide, Bruce, with the lost. And they just wanted to know a little bit more background about the community. How big is the community and kind of the process that they went through?
Yeah, well, so I'll share the community name. It's not a secret. So this was for Cook County, which, as most of you know, is where Grand Marais is located. And they've had their lost in place for about 10 years now. And with the pandemic, they were just super concerned to understand what the economic impacts of the pandemic might mean for their sales tax collections. Since most entities in Minnesota don't have a local option sales tax, or at least not one that they rely on for a large amount of GO bonds, which is the case with the county, because they financed a new YMCA, various other facility improvements, and an investment in broadband with their local option sales tax. And as a result, way up in Cook County, they have some of the best broadband in the state. But I digress. So, this tool is super helpful for the county to say, well, actually, we're doing better than projected with our sales tax because everyone went up to Cook County during the pandemic last summer and they did very well. So it turned out to be a positive story, not a damage mitigation story. But in any case, we refinanced the debt as well, which allowed that debt burden to go down. And now, as I mentioned, they're looking out over the horizon to see how soon can we actually pay this off and start looking at a new set of capital projects that can be financed with these sales taxes and with bonds, because up there, I think it's at least half of the sales tax dollars come from non-residents. It might be 60%. So it's a really strategic opportunity for them to keep that rolling. And most of the voters have buy-in with that.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, that's all the questions that we have. Bruce, Ellie, do you have any final thoughts before we close out our session here today?
One question I have for Ellie, and I meant to ask this, is I know the city has a very robust financial management plan, and you alluded to that. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the idea of an FMP as opposed to a CIP, an FMP really takes a capital plan. What are you proposing to do? In what years? How much is it expected to cost? How do you expect to fund it? Will it be cash or debt or some combination? But then FMP puts that financial or that CIP in a much broader context. So it looks at operating budgets for your major departments, looks at your projected fund balances, your tax impacts. And so it's sort of a organism that tries to contemplate all of the major drivers of your city finances over the next 5 to 10 years in most cases. And Maplewood has a really great one that I know you incorporate into your budgeting, into your CIP process as well. I was wondering how much, what are your plans on sharing more of those projections with the public via the ClearGov portal? Do you think you have ways of letting the public behind the curtain on some of that? Or I guess just what are your thoughts on showing that, yes, we are doing this multi-year financial planning? It's not a budget, right? It's just a plan. But do you think that would be an effective piece of information to share with the public?
No, that is a great question. It's certainly been a valuable tool in working with the City Council. And we do update it on an annual basis, the financial management plan, along with the annual budget and the CIP process. So they're able to have a snapshot of what the next 10 years might look like, or could potentially look like. And in that way, we're able to determine, by projecting out our debt service and projecting out our capital expenditures and projecting out our general fund operating needs, we're able to kind of determine if trouble spots are going to kind of appear on the horizon at somewhere during this 10-year period. It also takes a little bit of a crystal ball to determine what kind of growth you're going to have in the community and how much tax capacity you need to estimate. So it's definitely, again, very much a tool that might be difficult to really utilize with the general public, but I do think that there is some value into keeping some very high-level information available to the general public. So we actually do incorporate, we don't incorporate the whole 10 years, but 5 years into our capital improvement plan. So we do put it out there for the public to digest in charts and graphs. Let them know what we expect to happen to the tax levy, what we expect to happen to the outstanding debt, what we expect to happen to the tax rate and the property taxes.
So sort of the outcomes, you're projecting the outcomes without giving people necessarily an opportunity to armchair quarterback your specific assumptions.
Keep it pretty high level and always a disclaimer that these are simply estimates and projections.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great, and I think that strikes a nice balance between showing your community that you are planning, that you're not just going day by day, year by year, but also not inviting criticism or nitpicking that really isn't germane to the big picture that you're driving towards. So,
gosh, well, aren't you guys just a wealth of information? I love it. I could listen to this all day. Well, thank you, everyone. That's all we have time for today. I want to thank Ellie and Bruce for their insights and perspectives, and a special thank you to all of you who took the time out of your day to join us. Please note, both a copy of today's presentation and a recording of the session will be posted to your virtual attendee hub for your future use, and you'll be able to access this information as well. And because we're always interested in learning about ways we can make your virtual experience more dynamic and deliver content that's most valuable to you, we'd like to get your feedback through a brief survey. You'll notice just below the chat and the Q&A buttons that there's a survey icon. If you open that, you can simply click the Take the Survey button before you leave here today. And if not, no worries. We'd still love to hear from you and get your feedback. So we'll send everyone a follow-up email with a link to the survey so you can complete it at your own convenience. Either way, we hope you'll take the time to give us your thoughts and your feedback and what we did well and where we can improve to make your experience better. I do also want to mention that today marks the end of our Fiscal Smarts Financial Stability Education Series. To all of you who have joined us over the last month, thank you. And as a reminder, our elected official education series begins on June 23rd. If you or an official from your community would like to attend, please visit ellers-inc.com and then click on News and Resources, then select Events to find quick links to the event summary and registration forms. Thank you again for all of you joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.